work out. It wasn't good planning on our part.
Probably eating chips.
Mhm. As long as they're muted.
Okay, we are recording and we are live on YouTube.
Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. 5:30. Hope everybody had a wonderful holiday. I'd like to call to order the work session for the Frisco Town Council. Can I have the roll call, please?
Certainly. Mortensen.
Here.
Aronson.
Here.
Burley.
She'll be joining late.
Absent at this point. Fallon.
Here.
Held. Andy, you're muted.
Here.
Thank you. Incan. Not seeing him yet, but he will be here eventually. Sherburne.
Here.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. First item up on this afternoon's agenda, work session agenda, is the early childcare discussion. I'll turn that over to
Mayor?
Tony. Thank you.
Council members, on November the 9th, we had met and had a good discussion on forging a development of a child care program for town of Frisco. So just as a reminder, to go back to that meeting, there was general consensus in supporting a tuition assistance program based on the Breckenridge model. And then based on what we do tonight, then we could enter into an MOU with them, work with that on that. You support the concept of a kind of $50,000 annual childcare startup grant?
Like some folks online might be having
Oh,
trouble hearing you. I don't know which mic you've got, but we're both of them.
Can you hear me better?
Yep, they got it.
Okay. Supported, there was support for
Yeah, just
$50,000.
lean into the mic and speak up.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then you passed on the proposition of a teacher assistant program. Since then, working with Leslie, we've developed a tentative budget for fiscal year 2022. If you remember, you simply earmarked $250,000 originally in this budget. So since then, you've made a commitment of $65,000 to the Summit Preschool. We also have the grants, and if you want to do the anything else, we do have $573,000 in nicotine fund balance. So you're not restricted just to the original 250 minus 65, which leaves you about 185,000. Going forward beyond 2002, because clearly you're interested in a commitment that's long-term, what's the future funding source? Again, it could come from part one of the nicotine fund. That's $300,000. You could also look at the marijuana tax revenue, which is almost $500,000. So I think that said, there is sufficient current and future funding to support a pretty robust child care initiative on your part. One of the questions that was raised on the November 9th discussion was, do you want the program just to be defined by people that live or work within the boundaries of the town of Frisco? If that's the case. There's an estimated 34 families that would be eligible. So that would cost you, assuming again, about the same level of support that Breckenridge gives in their grants, a little over $6,000 per family. It'd be $232,000 and change. If you wanted to expand it to the 10-mile basin, I think Jesse brought this up, and there's a precedent for this. This is what Breckenridge does. They're awarding scholarships to families, not just within the town of Breckenridge, but for the upper Blue Basin. So Blue River is included. So if you wanted to do that, we can certainly do that. And roughly $120,000 additional expense. As far as the grant program, staff has looked into that, and the types of things that would be eligible, not to go into great detail, would be expansion of an existing facility. For example, they wanted to lease additional space, training for their staff, capital improvements for their facility, and educational supplies. Those are typical expenses that are eligible for a grant like this. We're revisiting the teacher assistants, and we don't intend to annoy you because I think we heard loud and clear at that time that you weren't interested, but I do this only because we were told repeatedly by the town of Breckenridge and early childhood options that they believe that was an integral part of dealing with child care and making it a robust, sustainable proposition. In fact, Breckenridge made it clear that they actually started not with child care assistance to families, but they actually started with child care assistance to teachers back in 2007. Then they added the family assistance afterwards to demonstrate how important that was to them. As we've discussed previously, this is not an inexpensive proposition. If you want to increase the average wage, which roughly I think at the Summit Preschool is probably in the $18 to $19 range. In Breckenridge, it's closer to 21. It's about $60,000 for every dollar you want to increase it. And I should also underscore that this is probably not a proposition you enter into just on a one-year basis. If you're going to do this, I think to be sustainable and to allow for these organizations to both recruit and retain teachers, I think you have to be in it for the long haul. And certainly Breckenridge demonstrates that. They've been at this for almost 15 years. So I don't want to mislead anyone that this is kind of a one-time fix and then you don't have to do anything. I think they become dependent on it. In addition, one of the positive outcomes in these discussions of the last couple of months, talking to Summit County and Breckenridge and Dillon and Silverthorne, is a recognition that we really need to have a comprehensive county-wide system. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have these pockets of support, whether it be in Fiscal or Breckenridge or Summit County and maybe Silverthorne, but we should look at the county as one service area and create a program. Again, Breckenridge has got a great model using that model, but doing it on a countywide basis. And to their credit, Breckenridge, I think initially may have been somewhat reluctant, because to be honest, they have a competitive advantage here. And, you know, if I was in their shoes, I would think twice also, as far as attracting employees and families to Breckenridge with this program. But they see the bigger picture here, what's in the interest of the entire county. And they have expressed that they would be interested in a countywide approach. To that end, you know, I think early childhood options has been at least identified as a potential facilitator in working with all the key funding partners, at least public ones. And I should suggest that if there is a countywide system, I think we have a much better chance of getting private partners like Vail Resorts, Copper Mountain, Vail Health, Centura Health, some major players, school district. So there's an opportunity here to build and leverage public funds with private sector, not-for-profit funds. I also recommend that if we were to go this route, we would ask, if the council could ask that the Childhood Local Options Board expand. They have the authority to expand, and that every entity, Dillon, Silverthorne, Breckenridge, and ourselves in the county should have some representation on that board. If we're going to commit long-term to a financial model like this, we should have someone there overseeing our interests. And I just strongly suggest Leslie Edwards, our new finance director, because she can bring to that discussion her financial experiences, which I think would be a major asset, both to the providers, but also to the board and other participants. So it's a related discussion. So that all said, we're asking you to make some decisions for us. First of all, do you want to go the route of just tuition assistance for families and employees of the town of Frisco, which would cost $232,000 and change, or do you want to expand that to the 10-mile basin?
Go for it, Melissa. I was hoping somebody would jump in.
Can you help me clarify that, Tony? Because that number seems awfully low, and I was under the impression that with the Breckenridge model, if you actually work in, like, for example, Jessie, I wish she was here for this. She's able to get assistance as somebody that works in Breckenridge for a child care center in Breckenridge. Can you just walk us through so that we're completely clear on what direction we're giving? That when we say employees, however we characterize it, these 34 families, because there's certainly a lot of businesses in Frisco with children in our daycare centers. And so would we have the option, would those families only have the option of paying? I also understand the Breckenridge model, you have to go to a Breckenridge based center, right? And so can you just please clarify exactly who would be eligible and what centers they could use? Because and I'll just jump to where I'm kind of at in my head is that if you work in Frisco, any business within the town limits of Frisco, if you live in Frisco, I'd want those folks to be eligible. And to me, it doesn't make a difference if it's a Frisco center or one within the 10-mile basin. I think that the ones maybe there aren't any other ones in 10-mile basin, but certainly, parents need options. If they're working at a business in the town of Frisco, but they live over in Dillon, are they not eligible? In my mind, I would struggle with that. So can you just walk us through that, please? Thanks.
First of all, the key criteria looking at the Breckenridge model is first income, family income. And in their case, it's between 73% AMI. Anything below that qualifies you for federal and state funding. So they have their own source of support. So it's minimum 73% of AMI up to 150%, which is roughly 150 grand for a family. So that's the first criteria. As far as the physical location of the employee and the resident, the question here is whether you want to restrict that to employees or residents of Frisco, or expand that to people that both work and live in the 10-mile basin. It's not related to whether there's a childcare facility in that, because that gets to the third issue you raised. We're proposing that this is not restricted because our Frisco facilities are already over capacity. Essentially, there's waiting lists. So if you got tuition assistance through this program, you could take that, effectively that voucher, and apply it anywhere in the county. If you can find a spot, fantastic, that money is good there. Now, this is all going to be much simpler once we go to a countywide system, but right now, before we get there, that's what we're proposing, and I think will be consistent with what a long-term county program will be too, that you can move this voucher anywhere in the county, just get a space and take advantage of it.
How is that only 34 families though? What am I missing?
That was arrived at working with the folks at Breckenridge, looking at the demographics here, and this is their best estimate of the number of families, employees that would be eligible. I just rely upon that because they've been doing this for so long, but they got our demographics, and this is what they indicated that it's not a guarantee, but their estimation of the number of people that would be eligible, both 34 within Frisco, and if you go 10 mile, it'd be a broader 51 employees or families. So that's based upon their knowledge.
Not include people that work in Frisco, obviously.
No, this would.
Yeah. Leslie has the answer. I'm gonna let Leslie jump in real quick.
Yeah, sorry, I can add to that. So it was based upon the percentage of elementary school children in the Upper Blue Basin, so Breckenridge, and the number of scholarships in Breckenridge. So they do allow the, like you were comparing to, if you work in Frisco, if you live in Frisco, but you work in Breckenridge, that percentage takes that into account. And they said that there's actually a very small number in Breckenridge that don't live in Breckenridge that are taking advantage of that. Now they do have more centers, but they also have more elementary schools there. So the presumption would be that you would still have the same percentage of people that would have their children attend elementary school in Frisco that would be utilizing the program.
Yeah.
So you might have a higher percentage the first year when people aren't, like you said, Dylan isn't participating. But in future years, when it's countywide, then these numbers should be even more accurate.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That makes sense.
Yeah, and Leslie, you might remember, my recollection is I thought there was about 75 families in Breckenridge and the Upper Blue Basin that were qualified for these tuition assistance. So that gives you some comparative sense of the number. And of course, Breckenridge is much larger than Frisco. So I know on its face, it looks like a small number, but looking at what's happened in reality. I think we can rely upon their estimation, but we can certainly add additional funds to the budget just to make sure that we can accommodate more families if it exceeds that number. That's just a projected number.
It was an estimate of 51, and that's actually scholarships from
Scholarship,
the Upper
yeah.
Blue Basin. So there
Yeah.
could be fewer families than that.
Yeah. So that was question number one. Any direction whether you want?
Let's keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, one is taking the numbers at face value, because if the numbers are higher or lower, it just impacts the number of students we're serving. But I think the question that's really is, are we drawing the boundaries around Frisco? And my view would be, yes, we are. Yes, we should. Mostly because two reasons. One is that's what geographic designations are there for, is the government supports the people and the businesses within its jurisdiction. I'm also concerned about the precedent as we move towards a county-wide program. If we've taken on the responsibility of paying child care assistance for those who actually are in the county, that's the county, the county's going to have their program. And so all of a sudden we're outside our lane. I want to take care of those in Frisco and the businesses in Frisco. Those that are outside our boundaries are taken care of by the county by jurisdictional boundaries.
And I think I don't disagree with that, Andrew. I think when I read the 10 Mile Basin, I think we're trying to capture kind of that Bill's Ranch, Wyborg neighborhood where, for all intents and purposes, they're Frisco residents. They probably work here. It just happens that the street where their driveway is the lot line for them not being Frisco residents. And that's why I see what's Lake Hill. And Lake Hill would be that right now, depends on that. I don't think, can't remember if Lake Hill falls in the 10 Mile Basin or not, but I think that's, to me, like trying to look holistically at who our community is. And I think they are part of our community, and I'd like to include them in kind of our geographic region because they are part of our economy, even though they're not.
So is Copper 10 Mile Basin?
Yep.
So
Yep. I see what you're saying.
to me, that's the county.
But also at 51 potential scholarship recipients, to me, that's just a better good and a better investment for what we get with looking at those numbers. And that's what the tax fund for now can help fund that. So,
But then it's the county's response. Why isn't the county doing that for their citizens? And I do worry about Lake Hill.
Yep.
Because all of a sudden this 34 is going to turn into a heck of a lot more.
Remember, I would estimate that what we're proposing will probably just be in place a year, 2 years max. I think by that time we'll be on a countywide system and these issues will be moot.
And that's more reason for us to stay with our boundaries
And that's-
until the countywide system is developed. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we've all of a sudden volunteered to adopt those folks when they're in the county.
we lost Dan. Andy, Held, where you land on this?
Hi, thanks. The whole 10 Mile Basin is still all 80443. And I do believe that, the people scraping to make it happen at Copper, even though they're working at Copper and living at Copper, their kids are coming here. That's how that goes. I would be in favor of expanding to the entire 10 Mile Basin. I hear what Melissa's saying, and can there be a plea deal, right? If there's a couple extra families, can they say, hey, I own a business on Main Street and I live in Dillon and my kid goes to Summit County Preschool. Can we, take part? And then, how many applications would that lead to in order to, put more onus on staff? I don't know, but my guesstimate would be there would be a couple. And I think in most cases, if they had a business on Main Street, I would support that.
I think we are including anybody who works in the town. So if they have a business in Main Street, if they work as the cashier in a business on Main Street and live in Dillon, their children are welcome into the program.
Yeah, so then that's fine, then that's clear there. I didn't think that was what Leslie and Tony were saying. But if that is, then I'm in agreement. So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Aren't we talking about the person who lives in employee housing at Copper, works for Copper, and has a 2-year-old that needs a slot in daycare? Are we subsidizing that child?
As you represent, we're subsidizing both a resident and an employee within Frisco, or if you choose, the 10 Mile Basin.
But I'm framing the 10 Mile Basin question. Which is
They would be
employee who
eligible,
lives and works for
assuming
Copper.
they would fit within the AMI.
Earning
band.
the right amount.
Yeah.
IMLO.
Yeah.
That's the person we're talking about.
And this, I think Jessie was the one that initiated this interest back in November. I know she's not here. She's had another meeting, but that's why we wanted to get some clarity on what direction you wanted to go. Any consensus on
I was gonna ask Melissa again, because she asked, and then maybe Dan can weigh in because he's back. But Melissa, you asked the question, but I wasn't sure where you were.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Thanks for coming back. Well, it's a tough call, but I think ultimately, if we're trying to go to a countywide system, I think we should embrace the 10 Mile Basin, because it just demonstrates that we're one community. And, you know, there's so few families that, you know, are, I mean, it's kind of, the bulk of the families will meet the policy by the letter or by the physical boundary. I also empathize with families that I know may live in Bill's Ranch, they may live at Copper, and they live there because there are no other options. And that's where they landed. But they're still part of this community. So I would lean that way, and but also use that as a good rationale for moving to the countywide system in the future.
You were leaning towards the 10 Mile Basin at this time.
That's right.
Andy Held, I see you're shaking your head. Are you in agreement with that? Okay, that's a thumbs up. Dan, go ahead.
Just as a refresher, can you describe the geographic boundary of the 10 Mile Basin? Because it doesn't run northeast to Dillon, correct? It's primarily Copper, Frisco, and surrounds. In other words, that Snake River Basin is Keystone, Dillon, right?
Looking for Don, because Don could tell us definitively. I believe that's a generally
Don is
consistent definition.
All right, Don, go for it.
Yes, that is correct. So the 10
Yeah.
Mile Basin covers
Yeah.
pretty much the area around Frisco. It would include Lake Hill, because that question was asked earlier. It includes Copper Mountain, goes all the way up to the top of Fremont Pass to Climax. It also includes the area around the County Commons and Centura Hospital. It does not include the high school. It does include the middle school, and it extends almost to Dillon, but not quite to Dillon. It stops in about the middle of Dillon Reservoir.
Can I make a further suggestion? That if council's leaning to including the 10 Mile Basin, that is only up until the time that the county develops their own program, and then we're out. We're helping the folks.
Okay, I
until the
just thought it was
county
important
helps
for
them.
anybody
But I want it to be
And-
very, I don't want to be
Here with-
setting the precedent that these are our
understand what we're
folks
talking about.
when the county puts their program in place.
They're all
I might suggest,
hey, Dan.
Councilmember,
Turn off your camera and then your audio may work better.
Yeah, because Dan, we can't hear you. There we go.
this fiscal year, because
That's what I was gonna say. We can,
every year you should re-examine this.
and I think, is Dan still on?
I'm
or is
looking
he-
for him. We may have lost him completely.
I want to make sure Dan, because Dan asked the question and didn't get to weigh in, but I agree with what Tony just said and kind of on Andrew, this tax, we'll know what these tax revenues are. We can revisit this and just do this on a yearly cycle until we see how things go with a community effort. But at that time, why would we not want to help They're not our tax dollars. They're for the education and protection of the youth. And this meets that to a T. And I bet 90, where else in the 10 Mile Basin are we getting nicotine tax from? I don't think copper is probably a huge revenue generator in that. So that's why I'm still comfortable with it. Stand back. At
No,
all?
he is not.
Okay.
So do you think we have
Well,
general,
when Dan gets back, but right now I think we're revisit it next year, but with the guidance of the 10 Mile Basin at this time.
then, given that, are you okay with utilizing the nicotine fund reserves, which are over $570,000 to get us through this year? So we would have to appropriate about roughly $214,000 from that reserve to fully pay for this program.
I'm good with that. I'm good. Yep.
Okay,
So you good with that? He held say yep.
and then, next question is,
Program.
well, do you have an interest in the teacher assistance program? And we just kind of laid out what the cost is for every dollar you want to try to increase wages. So this is not an inexpensive investment. So we want to make that clear.
The investment we've already made.
Yeah.
Whatever we're giving, I mean, the fact that we just gave Summit Preschool $65,000. Somebody on the screen might have a number, but I'm going to say 75% of their revenue is utilized for salaries. So 75% of 65,000 intuitively would go to salaries. We've just increased their revenues by 185,000 or more. To some organizations within, for every student, we're now increasing the dollars of revenue per student in the schools, 75% of which will go to salaries. So that's the school's responsibility to utilize their top line revenue and distribute it appropriately to their staff. And I think we hope that they will pay them appropriately with the additional revenue. But a separate line item for revenue or for salaries puts us in a place that doesn't put, we can't get out. You know, now all of a sudden next year, if we don't fund it, then what are they going to cut the salaries? I think it's our job to assist the schools, and it's their job to budget appropriately.
Melissa, I saw you throw your hand up.
So on this one, I think that the best role that we can play is helping that this is a problem that's bigger than the town of Frisco. And the best way to help the industry is to assist with lobbying the state and the federal government for teacher assistants and higher wages. I see this as bigger than something that we can tackle. I agree. I think the onus is on them to budget appropriately when we do give them contributions in the tens of thousands to somehow, I hope that can go a little ways towards teacher salaries, but I'll put it in the positive. I think that we have a federal lobbyist, we have a state lobbyist, and we should keep our eyes open for opportunities that that we can point them to and help assist them with grant writing. We've offered that in the past. I would re-offer that. I know Nancy did quite a bit of work, or at least evaluated, you know, where are there additional grant opportunities? You know, Leslie, maybe you have experience with that, but I know it's just very, very tough. Many of my friends have served on the board of the preschool, and I know how much they've struggled to make it pencil and come up with higher salaries. And at the end of the day, I think that that money needs to come at the state and federal levels, and I would love to help us proactively go after that money.
You muted, Andy.
Yeah.
There you go.
Sorry, there you go. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
we got you now.
Yeah, okay. Well said, Melissa. That's spot on. I agree with Andy as well. You know, the hope would be that, you know, schools would raise teachers' salaries. It's not up to us to pay their salaries. But brilliant as far as, we have a federal lobbyist. Let's get them money for that too. That would be, that would serve us well. Yeah, I'm in agreement there.
Sounds like, Tony, the direction on that one is not teacher salaries now. I would just, to throw in, I'm still all for it. I think, especially talking with Breckenridge Mayor and some of their staff, I think they hope that the thought process you went down, Andrew, would work out that way, and it hasn't, and that's why they continue to not only pay the tuition assistance, but also fund teacher salaries, because the cost of everything has never kept up with what they are able to do, and that their hopes were that by doing the tuition assistance, the salaries would be able to then come up, but they haven't seen that, from my understanding, come to fruition. So I'm in support, but I'm seeing three folks with a different direction, so I'm all about it. So we'll hold off on the salary assistance for this year.
We'll pursue, and we have been in discussions with our federal lobbyists, and the only thing holding us up right now is that particular legislation has not passed. It has $450 billion for childcare assistance, and so hopefully that's going to be released for a vote, hopefully in the next month or two. But that's what's holding us up from pursuing that money, because there's historically unprecedented amount of money for childcare in the wings, but it just not come to fruition yet legislatively. So we'll continue to pursue that. And then the final issue was, we had proposed, and you had supported the notion of a $50,000 annual kind of childcare grant, and this would help facilities, again, expand, enhance teacher training, educational aid. So you still in support of that?
It's also really for supporting anybody who wants to start an in-home childcare to expand the number of slots available. Like I view that as the primary.
Yep.
I don't necessarily view this as Summit Preschool coming in and saying, we need teacher training. Can we have some of that money? This is for people who come to us with opportunities to expand childcare.
Yep, I agree with that.
Then-
That was my understanding too.
We'll make that crystal clear. That will be a qualifying requirement. That has to be an expansion, create more capacity, not just take care of what exists. We'll make it clear. Okay. And then
Online, are you guys any help good with that? Melissa, are you comfortable with the grant program? Dan?
Yeah.
Did you need to put another word back in on the earlier conversation when we lost you for technical issues?
No, I was in alignment with the what
Okay.
appeared to be the consensus of council on that.
I just want to make sure you had your chance.
And then just the last one, if assuming that the Early Childhood Option Board takes the lead and facilitates the development of a countywide system, we're proposing that Leslie Edwards would be the most qualified person for us to serve in that capacity, and hopefully bring a lot of expertise to the issues that you raise, and that is the business side of childcare, which is very complex and difficult. And so I think her expertise would be a great asset to not only the facilities, but to this endeavor to try to make it a countywide seamless system of support.
I hope, Leslie, that was an offer you put out there, but thank you for
Yeah.
being willing.
And
She was drafted.
I could add that in addition to my experience related to the Breckenridge Child Care Program, I also previously served as the treasurer at Little Red Schoolhouse. So I also have some experience from that side of it as well.
It's awesome.
Super. Thanks. So that concludes our presentation.
That's huge, and I think a really exciting step. And I know we've talked about childcare now for a long time, and to have that come to fruition and have those funds is pretty amazing. So thank you, everyone. That's a good investment in our community.
Hey, quick question, Hunter, follow-up.
Yeah, please, Dan.
Hey, I'm sorry, I my connection flamed out there for a minute, but where did you land on the teacher assistants? I understand the scholarships you want to extend to the 10 Mile Basin, but was the teacher assistance conversation part of that as well, or did that go by quickly?
It went by quickly, as there was support to try to make sure we use our state and federal connections and lobbyists to have that be a bigger cultural issue, then Frisco tackle it on our own. And so we are not going to do any tuition assistance at this time, or sorry, salary assistance, excuse me.
All
We're
right.
not going to do any salary assistance.
All right, I just want to be on the record on that I would disagree with that, but understood.
You would be in favor of doing the
Oh,
teacher?
I think teacher assistance is critical. We're not going to get there fast enough with tuition assistance. We need to bridge the gap right away and aggressively change the paradigm. But I'm sorry I didn't have an opportunity to comment, but that's where I would have landed. So no, I think we have an obligation and an opportunity both, and we should be moving forward with teacher assistance immediately. But okay.
I appreciate that. Agreeing. Council good. Not always take public comment during work session, but see Jen McAtammy's hand go up makes me interested to hear her. Are you guys okay with that?
Did it go up? Did it go up and go down?
It might have. Maybe she. All right. Well, I know.
Oh, Candace would like to speak.
Candace, you're unmuted. If you'd like to jump in quickly, go ahead.
All right, I will be brief and I appreciate you giving this opportunity. I didn't know if it was, but it's very related to the teacher assistants. My name's Candace Day. I live in Frisco. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. So I am living exactly what you guys are talking about. My daughter goes to Carriage House. So we drive to Breckenridge every day. And I'm on the board of Summit County Preschool. So I'm actually the chair of the board as of a few months ago. So this is very relevant. Thank you guys for having this conversation. I did just want to mention something with that teacher assistance program. We are not operating at capacity at Summit County Preschool. And the reason for that is we can't hire enough teachers. And obviously that's an issue across the county, but it's really hard, especially at Summit County Preschool when we're competing with Breckenridge where they pay $3 higher. So we have capacity that we could increase if we could get teacher salaries up potentially. Obviously, there's a lot of factors that go into it. I just wanted to share that perspective of increasing capacity is increasing teachers, and a great way to do that is through their salaries. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I appreciate it.
Jennifer's hand is up as well.
Jen will give you a quick comment as well, given your.
Yeah, no problem. I just wanted to give you guys some perspective on the teacher assistants. So if you wanted to have that input, there were multiple reasons why we did that in 2017, which is the Direct Invest in Teacher Fund. But if you go back historically to the beginning of the tuition assistance program, that program created an immediate cash infusion and went directly to the schools, because the goal of that program was to have them raise rates over time to cover the true cost of care, but provide an immediate cash infusion so that they could raise salaries about 30% so we could stop the hemorrhaging. And so that is how, and then over a course of the next couple of years, the schools raised tuition, and we were actually on pace and doing that. The interruption that happened was during the recession, where, like, I'm sure the town of Frisco's government, right, you held salaries and froze everything for those couple of years. So that gap of not continuing to raise tuition over the recession actually made wages lag, which brought us back to the Invest in Teachers program and was recreated in 2017, once again, to stop, really to make sure that the wages were keeping up without impacting families. Based on the complexity of the tuition assistance program. So I just wanted to share that piece of it. And I think it is another piece that creates sustainability for your overall early childhood system, to have it be well staffed and know that those schools can pay those teachers an appropriate wage for the work that they're conducting. Thanks for letting me contact, and thank you for this great work. I have been working on this for a really long time, and it's wonderful to see the community coming together and supporting the families who are working so hard to be in our community.
And we're revisiting the 10-mile basin. We're revisiting the 10-mile basin conversation next year when we do this. So we will, I will put the teachers' salary assistance back on there so we can see where we're at, how we did. Go ahead, Melissa.
Yeah, I just want to thank Jennifer and Candace for speaking, because I think that's really compelling and certainly needs to be addressed. I think we need to revisit this, continue to think about it. It's really about the bang for the buck and getting the money where it matters most. And this is a huge step for us tonight to fund the program as we've kind of laid out. But it's not to say that we can't revisit this. I think that it also just sort of speaks to the need and the logic for a countywide system to sort of flatten, let's say raise salaries across the county so that it's not so competitive from town to town or center to center. I heard what Candace said about versus Summit County Preschool versus some of the Breckenridge centers. And, parents shouldn't have to necessarily make that choice. Parents, struggle with that choice as well. And of course, teachers. So I just want you all to know I hear that. That was great input. And thank you for sharing it with us.
And I would, if I can follow up real quick, and thank you too. That's exactly my point, is that, there needs to be another component to this to really make it effective and work. And scholarships are great, but it's not going to change the underlying issue of capacity, which is driven by compensation. And if we don't fix that right away, immediately with a cash infusion and allow tuitions to catch up, this is how we bridge that gap. If we want immediate impact, then we make an immediate cash infusion. So, and I'm sorry I missed that conversation, but I agree with the speakers. It's exactly where my perspective is, that we're falling short if we don't fund. So that's so thank you for reinforcing that.
Yeah, Andy, go ahead. Then we'll go on to the next agenda items.
Yeah, thanks. All good points. The thing for teacher assistants is really just more like, are we giving Summit County Preschool more money than we initially agreed to? And, we could even have said that, 75% or whatever went towards teacher salaries. Like if we're going to plug money back into the system and, and I think it's a tough road for us to be giving the money for these salaries. It needs to be, we need to support our schools in order for them to raise those salaries. It's not on us to raise their salaries, right? But it's on us to get the school to do so. And if the school will do so only by us giving them more money, is that, I feel like we're framing this conversation sort of in the wrong way. We are all willing to dump money towards education and, towards helping people get their kids into school and all. And by no means is any teacher getting paid what they should be getting paid, especially around here. That is the case. So I just don't think this program this way is the way to go about this. I think that's basically it. I think we have to raise teacher salaries.
Sadly for Dan and I, we're not doing that this go around, but we'll revisit it. So
We are, by giving them $65,000 in a check and increasing the revenue per child. So I just.
But the math and the lessons we've learned around the county have not seen that to fruition. And that's what Candace and Jen just told us, is that's not how it pencils out. I get it, but it's not where we're at, but we're not doing it. So I think we'll revisit it. And the majority of the council today said, let's revisit teacher salary assistance at a future date. And we'll continue to work on it, as Melissa said, because we won't let it go away, because it is important to all of us. Everybody's mentioned that it's not something we don't care about. It's just not where we want to put our funding from the nicotine tax at this time. So excellent. Next up is the agenda item number 2 for the work session, which is the Frisco Copper Visitor Information Center remodel.
Mayor, council, definitely a lighter topic.
Bathroom.
I have excellent wing people with me, which Susan Lee has been assisting. So she's on this call as well. Matt Stace has been working on the design for the two options. And then Jess Holly, the information center manager, is on this call as well. So we can certainly call to her about the general operations at the Visitor Information Center. Thank you so
welcome.
much. Great. Let's talk a little bit, very briefly, lay the foundation of an information center by the numbers. What is it all about? Why do we have one? How many people use it? Between 90 and 100,000 people use the bathrooms every year. Fairly stunning for the corner of 3rd and Main. It is used, we see, by visitors, by people stopping in their work trucks, by people walking their dogs. So it's used by residents and visitors alike. It is the only restroom open 7 days a week on Main Street. Hence it gets heavy usage. It's open outside the hours of the Visitor Information Center. It's open from 8 to 9. Information Center conversely sees about 45,000 visitors per year or users per year. We see locals who come in as well, trying to figure out what to do with their families. Here is the general impact of a visitor information center, as outlined by the Colorado Tourism Office. So what they found is if people come into a visitor information center, they'll usually stay about 2.5 days longer in that location, especially true for summer when people don't necessarily have plans and they're on a road trip. They're more likely to add activities to their trip because of the people who are there assisting them. They're more likely to talk about a future trip. We talk about a bunch of cool stuff. They can't do this trip, but they want to do the next time that they're here. And they're much more likely to learn about something that they didn't know something about before, changing their behavior, getting them to stay longer, having a significant economic impact. What are most of the questions about? I work there as well because we have staffing shortages as well. And it's always very interesting. I think it's fascinating to see the kind of things that people are interested in, but there's definitely a theme. I-70 in traffic, we tend to get a lot of visitors who need some help figuring out how to negotiate an I-70 closure, how to get around it. Should I take 285? Just generally need advice. Town events and events generally in Summit County. The information center is known for not limiting itself to just talking about Frisco. It's 1.8 square miles. We know that we need to talk about the rest of the county and about the rest of the state to be useful. And we do just that and talk about the rest of Summit County, hiking, biking, any kind of outdoor recreation. Adventure park, ski resort information is incredibly popular and in the top 5 right now. And then the age-old question, what are we going to eat tonight? We certainly get, what are you going to eat for lunch and what are we going to eat tonight? And we see it as a real opportunity to qualify people. So we don't just tell you where to go. We ask you what you're hungry for, what your dietary restrictions are, and we give you some great suggestions based on that. For us, we know that if you were just to wander around town and find maybe a restaurant that wasn't open, you might jump in your car and go somewhere else. If you go to the Visitor Information Center, we make it so that we give you a lot of options and a great map and hopefully send you on your way to a great experience and get you to stay here just a little bit longer. What were our goals in terms of the remodel? So about 3 years ago, I walked into the restrooms and they looked a bit shabby. It's been about 20 years at this point. Then it was 17 years since they had been constructed. And I also had something else that had really bothered me through the ages, and that was ADA access. Right now, and I have some great pictures. I'll show you the ADA access. It's through the restrooms. And right now you go through the restrooms, you come in either through the men's or women's restroom, and then you can come into the Visitor Information Center. You can't get into the Visitor Information Center from the front if you have some kind of accommodation that you need. That could be being on crutches, that can be being in a wheelchair, can be lots of different disabilities that we can't even see. So I was interested in ADA access to the front of the building, and so was our staff. Upgrading old fixtures in a 20-year-old restroom, expanding the men's restroom because it was woefully undersized. We often see lines at the men's restroom and we're like, wow, your women's restroom usually sees lines. Nope, it's the men's restroom. Building a dedicated IT closet. I'll show you some compelling pictures there as well. They involve, yes, a clear shower curtain, and then some secondary goals. How do we better utilize the interior space of the information center? It's kind of a room of doors, and we'll show you some pictures of that as well. And then, yep, more efficient janitor's closet access so we can keep the spaces, the visitor information center restrooms cleaner. It is incredibly important because our guests often, that is their first introduction to Frisco. They drive from I-70 down West Main Street because they see the signs to the visitor information center and they stop and they use our restrooms. All about 100,000 of them every year. This is our current ADA access. So that first photograph is the access into the restrooms. On the right-hand side, you will see the ADA ramp. And then next to that, you'll see the sign that's over in the women's restroom over the door that says basically, this is not an exit, it's your ADA access into the visitor information center. There's the same sign in the men's restroom. Then the next slide below that, where the boxes are, that's kind of our janitor's closet. And that's also the hallway you head into for that ADA access. And then the other picture is, of course, the front of the visitor information center, which is, to my mind and to our staff's mind, the place where ADA access really does belong. Current restroom conditions. I did not take pictures of urinals. You're welcome. Right now, there are 2 stalls, 3 urinals, 2 sinks in the men's bathroom, but women actually have 6 stalls and 3 sinks. So pretty decently sized. Current information center interior. This is what I talked about in terms of doors. It was made even more obvious when Matt Stace and his staff were there. There are a lot of doors in that space. The back wall that you're looking at, the picture to the left where it says Free Frisco sticker, that's storage, but also one of the doors is access, that ADA access into the restrooms. And it looks kind of like a wall of doors. And part of this goal is to take some of that and change that around, take some of those doors out, streamline that back wall, make it look much cleaner and be more usable. Then we have a door that we don't use currently right next to what we have turned into an info window. And Matt Stace had a great idea to really take that door out. We don't use it anyway. We don't need to have it per code. And to create an ADA accessible window, info window. We think it's something that we're going to keep using. It's one of those things that happened during the pandemic that actually makes some sense during times when we're a little busier, like Wassel days, when the information center is central point for handing out mugs. It's good to use during the barbecue challenge. It's one of those things that really makes some sense. This is our IT closet right now. And we had to cover it up with a curtain because we've had an occasional leak in there. That's pretty obvious that just needs to go somewhere where we feel better about putting expensive IT switches. This is the current footprint of the building. And it shows obviously the men's and women's restroom, what they look like right now. When we embarked on this project, I asked the architect to please come up with 2 options. And the first option was an option to use that current footprint to make that men's bathroom a bit bigger. But then what also evolved is to put in a staff bathroom as well, because our staff told us that they really could use their own space to change in their own restroom that was accessible from the interior of the building. Then to take a janitor's closet and make that accessible through the men's and women's bathroom, and then also manage to put in a really good IT closet and just make the space a bit more usable. So what they came up with was option 1. It's using that existing footprint. It's adding a little bit more to the way of the men's bathroom. It pushes out into that hallway. We use the hallway for the janitor's closet. We also use some of that for the restroom for the staff, and we managed to fit an IT closet into that existing footprint as well. I see it really as a solution for right now. it takes care of the needs that we have right now. We deal with having an ADA ramp up front. We make sure that we clean up the inside of the information center by getting rid of some of those doors. We thought like, hey, what would it be like if we still had access from the interior of the information center and the exterior to the restrooms? We actually don't think it's a very good option. Most people who come in, poke their heads in and say, hey, where's the restroom? And we say, hey, please come back for more information. Sometimes they choose to do that. Sometimes they don't. But people who clearly want to use the restrooms are doing just that. And because it is still a fairly tight space, we need a lot of that space on the back wall for brochures, for storage. We really feel like we're not excited about the idea of having an entrance into the restroom from the inside of the building, but we certainly did contemplate that as well. So this is option one with just using that existing footprint. So we said, what would it look like if we expanded and we could make the men's restroom a bit bigger? What else could we add in that would really meet council's goals around inclusivity? And one of the things we thought was pretty important is to have a bathroom with no gender specified. It could be a family restroom that a group could use. It could be somebody who's non-binary, who's trans, who does not want to go into a designated men's or women's restroom. And it really allows us to add a bit more to what is a very well-loved and used restroom facility. And it still allows us to throw in a janitor's closet that services all of those spaces. And it does something else. It allows us to take the lobby of the Visitor Information Center and expand that as well. And we think that that's positive. There really is benefit to still being able to service people face to face. We know the benefit to that. Yeah, we see great traffic on our website, but we know that when we are able to talk to people, we can really bump up in terms of the amount of economic impact that we have, just the way that we're able to guide people to different experiences, and that would make that happen. So Matt Stace did exactly what we asked him to do. And that is he came up with one option using that existing footprint, option two, expanding the footprint. While we were doing this, we certainly did consider the Parks Master Plan. When it was presented to council, there was not a huge amount of interest in that, what I would call a pocket park behind the Visitor Information Center. Other parks were identified as being a bit more important during that time. There are some things that we still would work out through this plan. This is really a preliminary design to give us an idea of how much it would cost to take on either option and what it might look like. Some of the stuff that we've talked to Public Works about and to Matt Stace about is we're not necessarily excited about where the ADA ramp is, has been relocated on the sidewalk to the west. In this second option, I think that there's certainly ability to add a sink, another sink in the women's restroom, and to look at that restroom just a little bit differently. But he did exactly what we asked him to do and really took a look at the footprint and what we could do with it. I think the details would come in that final design if you give us the blessing to go ahead with one of these options. It all comes down to the money, right? At the end of the day, to a certain degree. And it's a little over $500,000 for option one to use the existing footprint. And it's almost $1 million, at least right now, to expand the footprint and go with option two. We did add a contingency in of 12% for owners, an owner's contingency. I added in some money for replacement of fixtures. We would try to keep as many of those as we could, but replace it if we needed to with low flow for either option. And we would look at doing a final design construction drawings this year. We have budgeted for that, $50,000 for 2022 to do the final design construction drawings if council gives us the go ahead. And then we would look at construction for 2023. So that's where we're at. Council direction is what I'm looking for at this point. And any questions regarding either option, pursue option 1 or pursue option 2.
Thank you, Vanessa. I appreciate that. Anybody who wants to jump into the questions or weigh in on where they're leaning? Go for it, Andy. Yeah, go for it.
I'll go for it.
Thank you.
So first, I know there are some people in town that would say, we're not giving the teachers salaries, but we're going to spend $1 million on a building. So there's that. And, so what do we need? How do we need to remedy that? Again, I just think the avenue was not necessarily the right thing. I think then we just give the school more money. But I think we should give more money to the education system and the schools. That being said, this building obviously does not support the future of the town. The bathroom is rough. I was just in there the other day, and it's horrible. So I do see, personally, I'm builder background and that sort of thing. I think you go bigger, at least initially. We don't want to value engineer the thing down to have it not perform, because we're going to have, 100,000 people in there. So I think we pursue the more expensive option, but then we have to revisit giving teachers more money, or how we word that, so we actually end up plugging more money into that system. As a caveat.
Never seen 2 work session items tied together so closely. Thank you, Andy.
It was a losing proposition to go right after children and education, because I, of course, think that those are incredibly vital and important. I'm not sure that it's an either or discussion, though.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, it's Vanessa, that's an interesting perspective, because in terms of the context of the budget and not value engineering, but value spending, unfortunately, it always is an either or conversation to some degree. And Andy highlighted exactly the conundrum there, which is, typically, historically, you have these budget conversations in the context of each unique item, and and it becomes easy to not understand the context in which they really need, the broader context in which they really need to be considered. And, Andy put his finger right on it, which is, the conversations really start with how much do we have, and where can we put it where it does the most good. And I think Melissa alluded to that. And, Hunter, I go for the triple whammy and add ice if you want. Go for the trifecta and really wrap it up. But I'm an option 2 guy. We haven't done this for 20 years. I don't want to underbuild something for the next 20. Vanessa made it very clear what a vital component this is in terms of introducing people to the town. A little bit more space, and I can't even imagine what our talented staff is going to do to leverage that space into interesting aspects, interesting experiences to put in front of visitors. And I think you'll just see more people through there. So, just like, it's time. It's like the police department. It's like this. It's, the work we did at Public Works a while ago. Now it's time to do this. If it's $1 million, we've got it. We've got it for the teachers. We've got it for this. These are all good investments. Investments into the teachers is more important, I think, from a community standpoint, but this is no less valuable in terms of what we're putting out there for our business community and our visitors. So I'm an option 2 guy for sure. Nice work, Vanessa, by the way. Thank you. And Matt, good job.
Yeah, I'm going to bifurcate the conversations, because otherwise it's too complex. Meaning I'm just going to talk about the bathrooms. I see the need to upgrade the bathrooms. That's without question. 20-year-old heavily used bathrooms need upgrade. I don't see the need to spend what I'm sure will be $1.5 million because there's never been an initial plan that was anything other than about 50% under the real number. So I look at this as a $750,000 and $1.5 million project. And the bathrooms need to be upgraded. My desire actually would be to allow the additional expenses to go to a better visitor center experience. Meaning, I don't know what, I mean, we have great people in there who are doing great work. And I don't know what a great visitor center looks like. But ours is the same as it's always been. So I'd love to put some effort into, you know, what makes a great visitor center. I think there's more to it than pamphlets on the wall and a great group of people. So I don't know, but I'd like it to creep there. I would like to add the sustainability component. And I mean, I thought it's a great design one that stays in the footprint. But to say that we're going to be sustainable because we're going to repurpose a couple of fixtures, let's be sustainable. Let's replace the windows. Let's get rid of the space heaters. Let's insulate the building to an effect that probably we're not heating the entire corner on a cold winter day, because right now we are with the leakage. So I'm not afraid of spending the money. I don't see the need to expand. I think expansion is the least sustainable option in any conversation. So can we stand up to our values of be sustainable, stay in the footprint? There will be days that it's crowded. You don't build a stadium for halftime. You know, there's going to be lines at halftime. We're going to have lines in our bathroom at 4th of July and Halloween and the big Main Street days. So I love the design of incorporating. I know the staff there really will value the staff bathroom, and I understand that. So I think we get plenty for the non-expansion renovation, and we can be a little more flexible in upgrading the entire experience, utilizing the space. So that's where I hope we go.
Melissa?
I'm really on the fence on this one. How many votes are we at? I mean, I really, you know, in the grand scheme of things, I want to do it right. And the building itself, which of course has to do with the footprint, has a very dated feel to it. So I suppose, ignoring the earlier conversation, I would be in favor of option 2. To spend the money and expand the footprint at this time. But, you know, I think that I'll just leave it at that. I think that's where I'm at.
Fair enough. I think I agree, Andrew, that I think we add whatever percentage you said to that cost, because I think that's been our going rate. But I think I think expanding, I know looking at it and, you know, look at the problems we've had at the marina and how undersized, and the biggest complaints we have for that facility is all around the bathrooms and how much we're looking at that. So I'm good moving forward with the option number 2 as well and seeing where we go. But I'd like to incorporate what Andrew said, and let's look at making sure that building is also what we say we want. And walking that walk, so to speak. So that's
Great.
consensus is for pursuing option number 2.
And so next steps are we will bring, get Matt Stace to start working on those drawings, and we will bring them to you. And to Councilmember Arrison's point, yeah, we can always look at making the space certainly more interesting and more usable. I would say at the end of the day, fabulous staff is really key to an experience like this. I'm sure you experienced that when you went by this weekend as well. I've been to beautiful spaces in Denver that are fabulously gorgeous with computer kiosks and all kinds of stuff, and not such great people. And that's always an interesting thing, but we'll bring back to you some ideas around what to do with that interior to bring it up to speed a bit more, but also what to do with that footprint and then what that pricing will look like in 2023. All right, thank you so much.
Looking at the time and seeing no additional work session items, we'll take a 20-minute break and reconvene at 7 for the regular meeting. Thank you.
Anybody opposed if I eat here?
Yeah, I know that's true. What do we eat?
We're gonna have peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
I almost made one and I ran out of time, so.
Okay, we're rolling. Yeah, if we've got, did we get Rick on too? Looking.
Might just do it anyway.
He's in Mexico. isn't he?
Yeah, I think it's appropriate. No.
Wait until you're done.
Yeah, I'm not seeing him.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular session of the Frisco Town Council. I'd like to call to order the meeting, and may I have the roll call, please?
Certainly. Mortensen,
Here.
Aronson,
Here.
Burley, Fallon,
Here.
Held.
Here.
Oh, could you repeat yourself, Andy?
Here.
Thank you. Inkin, absent. Sherburne.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just like to start off with public comment. Anyone wishing to make a public comment that does not pertain to anything on this evening's agenda may do so now. Please keep your comments no longer than 3 minutes and state your name and your address for the record. If you are online, please raise your hand. We will unmute you. Call you for public comment. None. I don't see any online. Do you see any online?
I don't see any online.
Seeing no public comment, I'll close public comment at this time and open up for mayor and council comments. Council, any comments this afternoon? Dan, go ahead.
I think it was Christmas Day or just after, and marveled at the commitment and tenacity of our public works department out there every day that whole week. And what they did to keep our streets clear and what appeared to be unprecedented volume of people up and down the streets. And so thanks a lot for that commitment, Jeff, for your crew, your staff, and all of town staff who was there. This has been a really tough time. So many business, the staffing has just been decimated by COVID. And just everybody out there, just a little bit of extra patience, a little bit of extra love to any retail or restaurant shop that you're going into, where you see people working hard, especially on those weekend days. So especially when it's a powder day and you'd probably not be driving a loader, but dropping in somewhere. So Jeff, thanks for your crew. Tony, on behalf of your staff, thanks for the hard work over the holidays, and hope everybody has a happy new year.
Second what Dan said, yeah, it was a wonderful holiday treat to have that much snow, and I know that it's not always easy on our staff when that comes at that time. So, and I know working through the holidays and on the holidays is tough. So I appreciate everything our staff does across the board. It was a tough holiday season for sure.
Thank you all very much. I'll pass those words on to the crew. I'm sure they'll be happy to hear that.
Excellent. Good to hear your voice, Jeff. Thank you. Next up, are there any new staff updates, Tony, that weren't in the packet? Excellent. Thank you. Move on to the consent agenda.
Mayor,
Move to approve the consent agenda by Mayor Pro Tem Burley. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Aronson. Any discussion on the motion? Call the question, please.
Certainly. Mortensen,
Yes.
Aronson,
Yes.
Burley,
Yes.
Fallon,
Yes.
Held,
Yes.
Inkin, absent. Sherburne.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is new business, and this is agenda item number 1. And this is the 2022 resolutions for special event street closures and no pet events. I'll now open the public hearing and welcome staff and Vanessa. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, would you like to take public comment before I do this portion?
I opened up the public comment.
Oh, did you? Oh, okay. I need to be sharper.
That's okay.
Okay,
Cheap seats.
thank you. Cheap seats.
I'm maybe speaking in the-
No, it was me.
I miss things, so keep me honest, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No.
Thank you for being understanding, and council. So this is typically on the consent agenda. We pulled it off of the consent agenda. Let me explain the 2 items really quickly. One resolution is for no pet events. And what that really does, we don't have a lot of events where we say, don't bring your pets. they're really ones that make a whole lot of sense, like barbecue. Too crowded, too hot, food, just not an appropriate event. Some of our running races, like trail races, I trip over my dog constantly. Not a great place to have runners and dogs out there. So this allows the police department to potentially, hopefully first issue a warning, help educate people, and then issue a ticket if they need to, if somebody is insisting that their pet needs to be there. So that's that first resolution. The second resolution is for street closures. And this was done before my time, many years ago, because of a sensitivity, understandable one, to closing Main Street and the financial impacts and social impacts of closing Main Street. And so we typically come to council and say, hey, these are the dates that we're looking at closing Main Street. This year, we're a little bit back to normal, except we don't realize we're back to normal. So for this resolution, we missed a few things that we needed to have on there because we didn't do them in 2021. And I apologize for that. One of them is Easter. We typically close the 2 blocks here in front of Town Hall and the Historic Park. And this year it's a bit later in April. And then we also missed 4th of July, of all things. Yes, and we know when that is, 4th of July. But ironically enough, maybe in a nod to Councilmember Fallon, we also managed to forget Barbecue Challenge. Yeah, I thought that might make you happy. Yeah, good stuff. A little bit of levity is called for at this point. So
I was going to bring that up.
It was our subconscious nod to you. You're welcome. But it should be in there. The thing, though, that we really wanted you to weigh in on, and one is easier, and that is we added 3 concerts to Concerts in the Park. It's going to be a week later in 2022 because that first Thursday, if you approve closing Main Street for barbecue, will be a concert for locals here on Main Street. Right in front of Town Hall as part at the kickoff for barbecue. So that means we scooch back Concerts in the Park to the next week. It starts that Thursday, which moves 12 Concerts in the Park into September. And we get that it gets a little bit dark for those last 2 concerts, but it was also very, very popular. And I loved it. People who came loved it. The dogs that were well behaved who came loved it. Occasional parrot and cat came. So the first question would be, are you okay, Council Mayor, with us moving forward with 12 concerts in the park and them going into almost the middle of September? Head nods. Councilmember Sherburne. Okay, she had kind of okay, she got double thumbs. Okay. Councilmember Aronson, good with that as well? Okay, excellent.
Are we going to, so it's not the Thursday after Labor Day now, it will be the Thursday after that Thursday. Great.
We'll just keep it at 12. It felt good.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see how that goes. The second one, though, I do think is an incredibly important question to ask because of the promenade. First year, 2020, we know why. Because of the promenade last year and just the condition, as I wrote in the memo, that we found ourselves in with brick and mortar businesses, they were dealing with a lot. And so throwing an art festival on top of that, on top of a promenade, which really would not have worked out, did not feel the right thing to do, or even trying to find a different location for that didn't feel like the right thing to do for 2021. So I'm asking you a question that's a bit more kind of philosophical about how to move forward with art festivals in general. And as I wrote in the memo, absolutely there are believers who are like, hey, shopping begets shopping. And when I worked for the town of Breckenridge, we did a fair amount of economic surveys around that. And while that is 10 years ago, it did show that, yep, when people come for an art fair, they are ready to open their wallet and hit other stores as well, including bricks and mortar. On the other side of that, I think is a very valid argument as well. And that is people come to this art festival, we close 3 blocks of Main Street. Is that something that we want to do? Is it at a level of direct competition with other spending that we don't want to take part in as a town? So this is somebody who has rented Main Street for an art festival for quite a few years. Howard Allen, they're out of Florida. They produce art festivals around the country. You've probably been to this one and another community, probably. They do them all over the country. So the question really becomes August 13th through 14th. As a council, do you want to have an art festival on Main Street? Is that something you want to entertain going forward?
Question.
No,
I wonder if this is a
not necessarily.
broader discussion for our arts commission. I mean, is this something, to me, an arts festival is kind of the same no matter what community you're in. And so I would like to see something that's more unique to Frisco and that displays Frisco more than just another art festival. And so what does that look like? I don't know. So I would be willing to have an art festival if it wasn't just kind of the same pop-up one that happened in 10 other communities this summer.
Because that's what this would be. And they can't wait until we pop up a arts council and have them make a decision. No, I mean, they do need to figure that part out. We do meet the artists with the Summit County Arts Council the weekend after Labor Day, I believe. I'd have to look here.
Jump in on this one.
Sorry, September 10th. There we go. Yeah, absolutely, of course.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar. I mean, oh my gosh, this is absolutely, if as we ramp up our arts implementation, and obviously we haven't fully done that quite yet, but we know the Arts Commission, or excuse me, Arts Council is going to be formed here soon. We're going to have the strategic arts plan that will soon be underway. A weekend to have a summertime event, and I don't know that I would call it a festival, but I think Andy Held can attest to our Make Frisco meetings. There are so many ideas and so many fun things that we can do that really exhibit the uniqueness of Frisco and the personalities and the amazing artists and business owners. And so I don't know what that is at this point in time, but I would say put a placeholder for something, and let's work with the community and the artists to figure that out. Something along the lines of the arts. So by all means, I'm not a huge fan of the mass-produced art festivals. I love the art. I do go, but I'd rather see something more Frisco.
I'll jump in. I can't hear you, Mr. Mayor, just so you know.
Better go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, sorry, thanks. I think personally, especially in the retail world, art is one of the few things that actually fit, and I believe actually drives business to local businesses, as opposed to the barbecue fest, right? So I think we should do more things around art. I don't know that it has to be on Main Street while we're closing Main Street. Why not utilize the marina? We could put tents all along walkways and whatever. There's lots of options, right? We don't have to close Main Street. We've done smaller art fairs that are just in the historic park, and nothing wrong with that. I think that works fine. I think it drives business to the other art businesses in town, and I think they feel that way. So I'm in favor, but we don't need to close Main Street. And this particular, if this company is looking for confirmation right now, I'm okay putting that on the back burner, because once we're, as Melissa said, once we're more set with our Arts Council and everything else, those guys will make that decision, and we can get any sort of art festival to come here, and we can add to any sort of art festival whatever our own flair would be, to kind of make it a little more personal. So very much in favor, but for this particular company, I think we might go on the back burner at the moment. That's my input.
Andrew or Dan?
For me, this is the kind of event that harkens back to the day when we did whatever we could to bring people to Main Street. And, if anything, the last couple of years have shown us that what brings people to Main Street is everything around Main Street, not necessarily the stuff that's on it. So, I'm neither here nor there. I really like the mindset and the ideas that Andy, Jesse, and Melissa have brought forward. I think there's ways to disperse this kind of event into areas around town to get people to move to more specific and more unique areas, and, finding somebody who can work with us or developing that ourselves, evolving that either through the Arts Council and through Vanessa's talented staff, coming up with a different way to create that opportunity. And what I do like about this event is, the opportunity for local artists to participate at a very reasonable price. But I think that really should be front and center is that, we've got a lot of opportunities for people along Main Street and throughout town. All we need to do is if that's going to be the focus of any particular weekend, is to identify areas and maybe create ways for people to access and leverage those areas and set up some little zones and kiosks. But, I don't see the need to bring this to town and close Main Street for a weekend in August, because generally speaking, there's not a weekend anytime between the end of May and the start of October where we need to do anything to bring people to town. They're already here. So, don't have a lot of heartburn about it, but I don't, I have no problem not supporting this.
Relatively.
Okay. And I guess I just,
Happy to go with the
Melissa and maybe Jesse, just for clarification for Vanessa's side, is do something but not leave the placeholder in the street closure, but do an arts event potentially through our arts commission.
Yes, correct.
Okay, just so we make sure we're giving clear. Okay.
Hey, Hunter, one more comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
I can't, for some reason, and this maybe goes back to a comment that you made a couple of meetings ago. I can't, there's some level of uncertainty about a new council coming on board in April, revisiting the promenade, and which certainly is within their purview. So, and if that's the case, I'd hate to be committed to a Main Street event and then have to either cancel it or end up doing something along the lines that we just discussed, which is dispersing it throughout town. So, I know a lot of this is assumptive based on that the promenade is not going to be here, but there's going to be a new council looking at that.
And I was going to say the only street closure event I didn't see was the promenade, but I think that's a different topic for a different time. So
Wade into that.
At this time, I'll open up for public comment. Would anyone like to make public comment on any of these issues or matters? And if you are online, you can raise your hand and we will unmute you. I'm calling you.
Anybody?
Not seeing any public comment. I'll close public comment and back to council for potentially an approval of this resolution.
Do we have an amended version, or should I just make a motion including
the two?
Let's.
Easter and 4th of July.
I move, this is item number 2. Three.
Yeah, it's 3 items.
Number 1.
Somebody else. Do it. All right.
All right.
I move that we pass the 2022 resolutions for special events, street closures, and no pet events as amended to include the Easter egg hunt, barbecue challenge, 12 concerts in the park, and 4th of July, plus any other on the sheet that's just been handed to me that I didn't specifically reference.
Perfect. Thank you. It's been moved to approve by Councilmember Aronson. Is there a second? Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Burley. Is there any discussion on the motion? Can you call a question, please?
Aronson,
Yes.
Burley,
Yes.
Fallon,
Yes.
Held,
Yes.
Incan, absent, Sherburne,
Yes.
Mortensen.
Yes. Great, thank you. Next up is agenda item number 2, and this is approving the employment of Butler Snow LLP as a bond counsel. I'll open up the public hearing, turn over to staff, and Tony, is this you or is Leslie taking this one?
I can do it. Leslie.
Oh,
I'm ready to go.
okay, sorry, I just can't see every camera. Sorry, Leslie, it's all you. We'll get you on the screen in just a second.
If I can find you.
There she
There we
is.
go.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So the town's charter authorizes town council to employ special counsel to serve the town. Staff is anticipating a need for bond counsel as it relates to funding some upcoming housing projects that have been discussed at recent council meetings. Potential projects include the CDOT property on Granite Street and the State of Colorado Workforce Center on Galena. And to clarify, the role of bond counsel is to provide a legal opinion that the issuer, which is in this case the town of Frisco, is authorized to issue proposed municipal securities and has met all legal and procedural requirements that are necessary for the issuance. So with that in mind, in your packet, you will find a proposed letter of engagement for Butler Snow. And I must say that Dee Weiser and his team from Butler Snow are highly regarded across the state in tax matters, as well as serving as bond counsel. They are known to have a specialized knowledge relating to financing of workforce housing. And I've personally worked with them during when I was at the town of Breckenridge. Most recently, we worked on a 27-unit workforce housing project that was funded by certificates of participation. That closed in September and is currently under construction on Airport Road in Breckenridge. So I'd also like to add that Dee and his team are currently working with some other entities in the county right now. That includes an upcoming workforce housing project known as the Justice Center Project, which is a collaboration between the town of Breckenridge and Summit County. So overall, I believe that the specialized knowledge will serve the town of Frisco well in providing funding for the town's upcoming projects. One point of comparison that might be helpful is that the 2019 revenue bonds related to the marina, which were for 5.6 million, that had an issuance cost of over $65,000. Now, some of that might have been for some miscellaneous expenses like a credit rating, but the bulk of that would have been related to bond counsel. In this case, we're probably talking about a higher rate of funding. So staff recommends the appointment of Butler Snow to serve as bond counsel for the town by signing the letter of engagement that's included in your packet. And Mr. Weiser is online with us to introduce himself and answer any questions that you might have for him.
Please.
Good evening, Mayor.
There he is.
Thank
Good evening,
you,
Dee.
Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and members of council, and Thad. Good to see you and Leslie as well. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. We have been working on affordable housing projects around the state, from the Front Range to Telluride and points in between. In addition to the projects that Leslie mentioned in Summit County, we've recently closed financings for Vail, for Yuba County Schools, for Telluride, and the Colorado Mountain College. It does seem to be obviously the issue du jour among the public finance community, trying to solve this problem, at least in some ways, by borrowing. Our engagement letter, I would say the fee range is a little bit to be determined, because it depends a little bit on the scope of the project. And for example, if you proceed with the CDOT project, how much Thad's going to want me involved with negotiations with CDOT, or whether he'll be handling that. So that's why we have the range in there that we do, but it's probably about right. We charged Breckenridge $72,000 on the last financing there. Vail was about $75,000. Yuba County Schools was in that range. So I think that's in the ballpark. But as we get closer to actually pulling the trigger and starting work, we can get a more refined estimate for Leslie and the staff. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dee. Council, any questions for Leslie or Dee at this time?
I had one. Which a lot of it is, and thank you, Leslie and Dee, for responses to questions I brought up with Tony earlier today about how this works, where it sounds like it's, and by the way, you guys check out as the team to hire. So that's not a basis of my question. It really is just kind of, when does the meter start running? Because as I would view it, we're not making a determination that this is the method of payment that we're going to be utilizing to build these projects. So, I mean, it's great that we have an engagement letter. What triggers the start? And that's to staff and D.
Well, maybe I can answer that if it's all right. Really, the meter never exactly runs because we don't charge by the hour for these engagements. It is customary in the public finance world, particularly in Colorado, that these be done on a different kind of billing arrangement, a flat fee, which is really contingent upon the closing of the transaction. My partners around the country might wish it were different, but that's the way it is done, and we take the risk of whether the transaction actually gets to closing. But it doesn't matter whether we spend 3 hours or 300 hours. We'll do what we have to do to get the transaction done, and that's why the fee is set up the way it is, as an alternative flat billing arrangement. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does, but are we, and I guess it's more of a question to council, are we making a determination by engaging your firm that this is the method we're using to build our projects? And I just want to make sure that the answer is no, otherwise it's a very different conversation. Like, that's a conversation that will happen down the road, whether we want to build for cash or enter into a private public partnership with somebody or utilize this method. I don't feel like we've had that conversation, and I don't want this to be viewed as driving an answer to a question we haven't been asked yet.
My understanding is where you are, Andrew, is that this is having them available to us once we do have that conversation, so that we don't have to go through this then at that time, if that's the route.
Right.
So that's my view too, is we're now part of the team. You are the decision makers to decide how you want to proceed.
And part of the reason for this timing is related to the CDOT contract that we need to negotiate, and we need to understand that if we were to go down this route, that none of the decisions that we're making related to the CDOT contract would jeopardize any future decisions.
Any other questions from council at this time? Open up for public comment. Anyone wishing to make public comment on this agenda item may do so now. Checking the online participants. Seeing no public comment, I'll close public comment and back to council discussion and perhaps a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move the approval of approving the employment of Butler Snow LLP as bond counsel agenda item number 2.
It's been moved to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Burley. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Held. Is there any discussion on the motion? Can you call the question, please?
Certainly. Burley,
Yes.
Fallon,
Yes.
Held,
Yes.
Inkin, absent, Sherburne,
Yes.
Mortensen,
Yes.
Aronson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dee. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Leslie.
Thank you.
Next item is agenda item number 3, and this is the State Advocacy Services Contract. I'll open up the public hearing, turn it over to staff and Tony.
Handle this. In May of 2020, the town council entered into an agreement with Squire, Patton, and Boggs as part of a consortium that included Summit County, Breckenridge, Dillon, and Silverthorne, which made sense to leverage each other's dollars at a cost of $90,000. So each party paid their pro rata share, which was about $18,000. Unfortunately, but I think it's in the best interest of everyone, Summit County and Breckenridge have entered into their own agreement with this firm, Squire, Patton, and Boggs, for both federal and state advocacy, which I think is prudent. It's a significant contract, but because of that, this consortium for a state advocacy contract that you entered into in 2020 becomes moot and void, because Silverthorne is also diverted to hiring their own federal and state advocate. But I think in the long run, everyone will do better going this route. We took that route with the federal contract back in the fall. So unfortunately, we won't have any financial support. I did talk to Dylan, but they have passed. So if we want to have state advocacy, especially in light of the immediacy of some of these housing projects, we have some significant opportunities with DOLA on both the Galena and the CDOT properties. They're quite interested in both projects. We're talking potentially millions of dollars in grant funding. This is the time we need someone in Denver advocating on our behalf, because these are hard fought grants, and any advantage we can get, we should. And so the cost of $75,000, though significant, will pale in comparison if we're successful. And I would argue, if we're not successful in next year, then maybe you need to reconsider even having a presence in Denver. But that said, I think we definitely need one this year, and that's why we're proposing this, because the timing is so important.
Thank you, Tony. Any questions for Tony at this time? Seeing no questions, I'll open up for public. Oh, so go ahead, Dan.
Well, maybe I'll just wait for comment for
Okay,
council
great.
discussion. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this agenda item? Please do so now.
Couldn't tell you why that just came through.
Seeing no public comment, I'll close public comment and back to council discussion. Go ahead, Dan.
I guess the question is everybody kind of runs to the runs to Squire Patton Boggs, obviously a competent, well-established company, and we've had great, I won't say great success, but a great relationship with them, at least since we engaged them. Is this the kind of thing that we need to go see if there's someone else who provides the same level of advocacy that it just seems strange that they would represent the county and Breck and us all to the same people and be able to do it uniquely on our behalf. I guess I don't understand how one entity does that. And I think this is the year, like Tony said, to have someone identifying those sources and guiding us in that regard. I just guess I need to appreciate how the same company is going to equitably represent everybody for the same dollar.
To that end, I've had experience. This is a very large, powerful firm with 45 offices in America. So they carry a big stick, both at the state level and certainly at the federal level. I think your concerns are valid, and I might want to suggest that maybe next year, if you're interested in the state advocacy, because this all kind of came apart with the decisions made by Summit County and Breckenridge, and I don't fault them at all. But given the immediacy of the need to lobby with these two housing projects right now, I think it would be prudent to retain them. But next year, in the fall, we could probably solicit through an RFP if we've been successful, and look at different firms, because they're not the only firm that can achieve this. I've worked with other major firms and they're equally successful. So your concerns are valid, but I think the timing probably necessitates doing this in this manner now, because they need to lobby immediately. Mm-hmm. These DOLA funds are highly desirable, and there's a number of entities in Colorado pursuing them.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, thanks. Partially, we would probably want to hear from Mara on this, but as this is relative to how my business runs, mm-hmm. which is if we're representing multiple brands in a particular GL or a particular area, then you have more ability to negotiate for everyone than you do for just representing one small piece, right? So I would think that Mara would be on board with that. And the idea is she's going and talking for everybody and getting money for everybody. And here's your cut, here's your cut, here's your cut. This is what we were looking for. This is what Breck was looking for. That's what I would assume, or I would hope we would get from Squire, Patton, and Boggs. I think that's absolutely within reason. But I also, we need to see results at some point, and when is that? Is that, this year is what we give it? And, what results, what return did we get on our $75,000? Have we, right? I think we also need to be in the game at the state level. It would be unwise to just be at the federal level and not be missing out on funds that we know are available there. So that's where I'd be. I'd like to see what Mara has to say to that.
Other comments? Go ahead, Melissa.
Yeah, so ultimately I'm in favor of investing in this right now. I will say that, this has been obviously it's a new landscape. There's a new need that perhaps certainly was not as strong 2 years ago, 5 years ago. However, I also want to recognize that, we are still a local government. Our funding comes from other sources, not, we can't rely so much on lobbyists to sort of help bail us out. That being said, there may be some great opportunities that we should pursue. And especially at this time, I think, this is the landscape that we're in. And hopefully we can get some of that money. I really do, though, I think that both Dan and Andy kind of have alluded to it. And so I'll just kind of say it a different way is, we want to see some productivity. We want to see some results, maybe some status updates, maybe some, hey, this is what we learned in the Capitol this month. We've really kind of, so far, and maybe it goes to staff and we're not as, close to it as you all, or you are, Tony. But I think that as we go down that path, seeing a little bit more as to what is the lobbying doing? How is it reaching Frisco? What are the conversations that are being had on a weekly basis, even on a monthly basis that that would be interesting to us, that we can then try and open other doors as a result of those. So right now it feels a little bit in the dark. I get it. They're a big firm, powerful firm, things happen, but at the same time, we're making quite a big investment in one firm at the state level, federal level. Let's do it. But I'd like to see some, a little bit more progress along the way.
Other comments this year? I just say, Dan, I shared your similar concerns, and I definitely thought that as well. And I think where I landed is our two projects specifically this year, both are in partnership one way or another with the state. And I think that's where I felt a little more comfort on this, where that representation in those conversations won't be had with others within the community. And that kind of made that a special arrangement. And that's where I had a little more confidence. But I think Tony's heard it, and that we definitely want to see results out of this, or next year we move on or do something different.
I had less comfort when we all shared the contract. It's a lot more comforting that it's our own contract because
This is the more traditional approach.
right. Yeah.
Fend for yourself. Up the trough.
Yep. Any other?
And I'll follow up on that. We'll continue to give you updates. I mean, to date, we provided updates as far as they're on the federal contract, which started December 1st. They've identified a host of federal grant opportunities, particularly in affordable housing, wildfire mitigation, and environmental sustainability. And they've also identified grant writers that we can contract with that can write specific grants, because it is an art for the different sources. So that's going well. And then we'll do the same on the state level. But the state level, they're definitely focusing in on these two housing projects right off the bat. And they have very good relationships with DOLA. So we're hoping that will pay off.
I would back up that we would love to hear that kind of stuff more often. Just because it's interesting and we can learn how that process works. So that would be great.
To that end, maybe I work with Mara where maybe every other meeting, she can take 5-10 minutes and give you an update in addition to what we're providing you, because she's on the ground 24/7, very responsive. So I'll arrange that with her to provide those kind of in-person updates or via virtual.
Yeah,
I think that'd be good.
Yeah, either way. Do we need, because this isn't outside of our financial, do we need to call a vote on this, or are we just good on the?
Yeah, because you're
approval?
gonna
Okay.
have to, this wasn't budgeted, so we utilized
Correct. Thank you.
excess operating reserves for this 75,000, so we need a vote on that.
Great. Then we'll open up for public comment on this topic. Anyone wishing to make public comment at this time? Can't even remember if I've done that now, but we'll do it again on this one. And seeing none, I'll close public comment and back to council for motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the state advocacy services contract, agenda item number 3.
It's been moved for approval by Councilmember Aronson. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Sherburne. Any discussion on the motion? You call the question, please.
Fallon,
Yeah.
Held,
Yes.
Incan, absent, Sherburne,
Yes.
Mortensen,
Yes.
Aronson,
Yes.
Burley.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next up is agenda item number 4. This is first reading of ordinance 22-01. An ordinance submitting to the registered electors of the town of Frisco at the regular town election to be held on April 5th, 2022, the following questions, setting the ballot titles for such questions and providing for the conduct of the election. So number 1, whether commencing June 1, 2022, the town of Frisco should impose an excise tax of 5% on the short-term rental of accommodation units as a new tax pursuant to Article 10, Section 20 of the Colorado Constitution. And question 2, whether the town charter should be amended at subsection 3-1B to excuse any council member's absence from a council meeting when their absence is based upon pending or recent maternity or paternity. Now open up the public hearing, turn over to staff, and Don, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Mayor read out, this proposal is to set a couple of ballot questions for the April 2022 election. As a homeroom municipality, Town Council is authorized to refer proposed amendments to the town charter to the voters at regular elections. Based on the direction received at prior council meetings on 2 different topics, staff has drafted 2 potential ballot questions for consideration. The first question is proposed to establish a new 5% excise tax on short-term rental accommodation units. Revenue from this new tax would be anticipated to be in the range of $1.2 to $1.5 million on an annual basis, and would be used to fund workforce housing programs. This excise tax would be on top of the current sales tax and lodging tax that is collected on these short-term rental accommodations for a total, which would put the total tax on these units at 15.725%. Near other nearby jurisdictions, including Breckenridge, Silverthorne, Dillon Vale, and Avon and Crested Butte, have taxes also on these short-term rental uses, as do most communities. But these communities have taxes in the range of between 10 and 20%. So that 15.725% would be in about the middle of that range. So with that, because there are 2 questions proposed, it may be easiest to break this into any questions you have on the first section before we move to the second question.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Don. I agree. Any questions for staff at this time on proposed excise tax? No? Okay.
Moving on to the second question, this is a little bit more of a, this is a recognition of a a happy event that we had this past year where one of our council members welcomed a new member to the family. As part of that, council recognized that the way the charter is written, council member absences do not exempt events related to pregnancy, whether it's paternity or maternity. So with that, staff crafted a ballot question that would allow, or that would amend the language in the charter to excuse absences related to either impending or recent pregnancies. Any questions on the second question?
Yes. And before I even ask the question, I would like to make it very clear that I'm in favor of a large paternity and maternity leave period for these events. But we do have a process where, and the problem came up that council person was out for a long time and we just never formally excused her from the council meetings that she missed. So why was it viewed that we need to take this to the voters for this specific thing? Whereas, I mean, honestly, if we had a council person with an illness or a parent with an illness out of town, there's 100 things that would allow us to excuse a council person from missing the designated number of meetings. What prompted the conversation to say we need to take this to the voters? My view is we already have too complicated of a ballot, so to add one more thing when it really isn't that necessary to accomplish the goal, why are we doing this?
Sure. And I may ask our town attorney, Thad Renaud, to jump in on this as well, but I believe that it was because it was not specific. If I recall a meeting back in July or August, the mayor and council did recognize that there was an extended absence and made that acknowledgement and essentially excused that outside of the town charter. This would actually make it where there was no action required by town council. And Thad, if you have anything to add to that, that'd be great.
I don't. I think that is the distinction and was the goal of the proposed amendment, was to simply, for this purpose, have it happen automatically and without any action on the part of council. Whether that's necessary, I'll leave to the judgment of the body.
Did you have a question,
Well,
Jesse?
I'm reading this section again and I'm just, maternity and paternity aside, I don't recall ever taking formal action to excuse anybody from anything. So I'm not sure there's a process written out here, but we've never really.
Well, it only concerns for consecutive meetings or 25% of 1/4 of the meetings in a fiscal year. I'm not sure we've had the issue in recent memory.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Andrew in a way, like, I don't think that would fail, but like, what a weird thing to have on, it just seems like it's overly complicated and we could just address it here. But if that means that in the future going forward, we wouldn't even have to ask for the absence, then I understand that too, but it seems weird to ask the voters for that.
Other thoughts, Melissa or Andy or Dan? Or questions? I guess we'll go back to discussion. Sorry, I was getting ahead of myself. Any questions at this time on that particular issue?
Well,
yeah.
Is there an applied number? If a number of meetings to be missed, is that, can you miss a year of meetings? Can you miss, is it, I'm assuming if the charter, if, Thad has just indicated is 25% in a year, what difference does it make why it's missed? And if we're excusing for maternity or paternity, is it still that same 25% threshold, or are we introducing an unqualified absence?
We're introducing an absent qualified only by pendency or recency, as those terms would be construed by council from time to time. So it does not become a numerical limit. Those absences, no matter their frequency or volume, do not count against the absences which can form the basis of misconduct in office if not excused.
And this would be the only example of, this would be the only example of an episode that was so qualified, right? In other words, in the
Yes.
charter, nothing else in particular is called out. Now, this just creates something, it creates kind of its whole different arena, if you will.
An exception to the rule otherwise applicable to absences that could lead to a determination of misconduct in office. Yes, and the only such.
Yeah, I think that's more problematic. So, yeah.
Let's, Andy has a question, then we'll go to public comment and back to discussion.
Well, procedurally, can we bifurcate the agenda item to, out of respect, because I don't think anybody's probably here to talk about this.
I thought that's why Mary was here.
So can we bifurcate the agenda
Well, I think,
item and
but I think
for
this,
voting purposes as well?
yep, is that possible? And do we need to do anything to amend that to split these two into the?
Any motion for the ordinance would presumably reflect whatever additions or subtractions are desired from the ordinance. There needs to be one vote on the ordinance with directions for me to come back with amendments or for portions to be stricken or provisions to be added, that sort of thing. So I don't know if I can bifurcate it in terms of 2 votes on one ordinance, but you can take out or add whatever you like.
Okay. Then I think I'm hearing, and I'm just going to summarize this in an open public comment, that it seems like potential ballot question number 2 doesn't have at this time enough support from council to move forward with that as we move into discussion. And I think the bulk of the conversation moving forward will be on question number 1. And I think that kind of meets the middle of where you were headed, Andy, with streamlining it for everyone's time in the audience this evening. So is council good with that summary at this time? Yep. Okay. Then with that, I would like to open it up for public comment for either of these 2 items. And please remember to keep your comments to no longer than 3 minutes. And welcome, Mary. And if again, state your name for the record as well, please.
Mary Waldman, 261 North 6th Avenue. I made a comment back in October 26 opposing the proposed 7.5% excise tax, that it would make Frisco the highest fee town in Summit County. Then on November 30th, I attended the council discussions on excise tax and license cap. In that meeting, you said excise tax is a pass-through. People never look at fees when they book hotels, do you? Perhaps people don't look at the fees, but I can tell you, everyone looks at the total dollar out the door. When we compete for bookings, we are very conscious of how we price to stay competitive because people coming to Frisco shop around. What you're really doing is forcing property managers and second home owners to fund the excise tax. Yes, the money comes from renters, but because I must lower rent to stay competitive, the money comes out of my pocket, not the renters. You are not taxing the guests, you're taxing me, the property managers, and all second home owners. If you are an elected official thinking that the housing is a priority, then you should find ways to fund it. Instead, you are abdicating that responsibility and putting it on the shoulders of private businesses and second homeowners. Why should the entire burden of funding public workforce housing be carried by us? This is not right. Colorado just received billions of dollars from federal infrastructure investment bill. Explore that grant funding from the state that Tony just mentioned. Everyone in Frisco will benefit from increased workforce housing. Everyone should contribute to fund it. The renters, the second homeowners, the government officials, businesses, and locals. Why not a 0.5% sales tax, like what they did in Vail? They spread the pain and the benefit to everyone. Why don't we? Thank you.
I'm Julie Coster. I live just around the corner on Creekside here in Frisco. And tonight I'm coming to you representing the Summit Alliance of Vacation Rental Managers. With the statement that I emailed out earlier this afternoon, but it was a little bit late. I think you guys might have already been in work session. So I just wanted to share some information with you all from our board. And essentially what I'd like to say tonight is we would really like to work with you and support the effort in order to bring funding to bear on the workforce housing issue that we're currently experiencing countywide. This issue impacts everyone, including our members of SAVRM, as well as their employees. And we want to be a collaborative force within every discussion that seeks to impact our shared community issues. To that end, we certainly support a reasonable tax of 2.5% or somewhere close to that on all lodging within the municipality of Frisco, expressly dedicated to workforce housing solutions, and with a sunset of 5 years, providing the opportunity for renewal of the tax by voters if needed. Essentially, what I wanted to say to you all tonight was I'd really welcome any further conversation on this, and would just ask that maybe instead of just rushing to put this on the ballot right now, let's just keep the dialogue open and continue having conversations on this to make sure we do the right thing. Thanks, guys.
Hello, Council, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Josh Walker. I live at 200 Granite Street, just also right around the corner here. And I feel that the other people that have spoken tonight have done a great job at really summarizing a lot of what I feel as well. So I would like to echo their thoughts. But in addition to adding that, you know, when it comes to funding the workforce housing, the amounts that were thrown around, the expected $1.2 to $1.7 million is still going to make really a drop in what needs to be a large bucket of funding that to ultimately address this problem. I mean, if we look at, you know, people who, like myself, have been renting up here for many years and I'm trying to find affordable housing to purchase, you know, even if you guys gave me $1.2 million right now, I still might not be able to find a place to live. So that's not really an effective way to address this problem, in my opinion. I feel like, you know, I understand that maybe that could be used as the financing for like a maintenance of a large project, but really that's not paying for anything. And I don't think that that's, you know, by focusing on putting it on a very specific part of the community, as they said, you know, that's going to impact a really select subsection of the population for what is ultimately a widespread community gain. So I feel like those costs should be defrayed across the entire community as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. Anyone? Is there anyone online wishing to make public comment? And while Deborah's looking at that, Julie, I just wanted to say that Deborah was not on your email with the comments that you submitted from your group. And so I just forwarded that to her. So that letter will also be in the public record. So you know, she now has that to submit to that. Welcome. Thank you for that. No more online comments and no one else in the room. I'll take this. I will close public comment at this time and back to council discussion. Got my pages all, here we go. Anyone interested, willing to go ahead, Melissa, please.
I'll just keep it brief. I heard, I think maybe from all of you, definitely a couple of you, that this doesn't go far enough. And I just want to, in terms of funding affordable housing, and I just want to assure you that we are not looking purely to short-term rentals to fund workforce housing. What we're looking to do is to help offset the problem that short-term rentals have created in our local housing landscape. And so there, I'm not going to list them off right now, but there are several ways that we fund workforce housing. One of the biggest ones being a sales tax that we all pay into countywide, the 5A fund. And so I just, you know, I wanted to just clarify that because I think it's very important. We are not putting the burden of workforce housing solely on short-term rentals by any means. So that's just one point I want to make. And I'm in favor of it. I think that it's Workforce housing is an age-old problem in mountain towns, has been for decades. The addition of Airbnb and VRBO in recent years, as well as other things like work from home economy and many other factors, have dramatically, astronomically changed the market values of homes in Frisco. Looking at occupancy, we need more people that are able to work in our community that can live here. Right now, it's shocking, the state of our employment, and hearing from locals the struggles that they go through, just like the last gentleman that spoke, to try and find a simple rental, let alone buy their own place. And so short-term rentals are part of that equation. They're not all of that equation by any means, but I believe that a 5% excise tax is appropriate, and I support it.
Thank you, Melissa. Dan, did you unmute? Go ahead.
Yeah. You know, this is difficult. And I do agree with a lot of the speakers that that in theory, in principle, you know, the burden of workforce housing, of creating new and expensive workforce housing and capacity needs to be spread across more of the economics, you know, our local economic spectrum. But that being said, you know, STRs definitely are unique in the proliferation of STRs. It's been unique in contributing to a less capacity. And there's a lot of different ways to look at this, but I think it's undeniable that there's an impact that proliferation has had. Now, and I think even here in the comments of you know, the people who came and spoke tonight, there's a recognition that it's there, and also a willingness to participate in a solution. And it really kind of comes down to a degree, you know, 7.5%, 5%, 2.5%, what really is appropriate. And you know, how does that correlate to the perceived impact? And a lot of that, of course, depends on where you are. You know, I certainly didn't support 7.5%. I struggle with 5%, and I really, I think 2.5% is reasonable myself. I think the lower number, but regardless, I think at 5%, if we're going to do this, one of the things we need to explore that we haven't right now is the idea of exemptions for short-term rental properties that collaborate with the town and help us advocate to convert unused capacity to workforce housing. And something I'd like to see us consider from an exemption standpoint is, for example, you know, any STR license holder who can lease their property into the local workforce for, say, a minimum of 90 days can be exempted from the excise tax for that tax year. Because what we're trying to do is create workforce capacity. And if you've got somebody who if we can incentivize the sector and not feel like we're penalizing the sector, and get property managers and get STR owners to work with us, I think create an incentive to use an excise tax to bring people, to help us bring that capacity to us. And that's what I'd like to see. So at 5%, that's a manageable number. That's a real number to create, you know, to allow an STR license holder or property manager to help them create, in Mary's words, I mean, it's real dollars out there to help create a competitive advantage if they can help us find capacity. If they bring that to us and it's 90 days, 120 days, whatever it is, then to the degree that unit is short-termed or under 30 days for the rest of the year, we can exempt them from the excise tax because we've got what we wanted out of that. We have capacity. We have landing pad units. We have units that we can manage. I think it's important to find more dollars. You know, if we were to fully utilize that $5A that we have in terms of the Housing Locals program, we'd burn up a ton of that cash. If we were out there buying properties right now, which we should be doing, we'd be burning up we'd have most of that 5A money that we have in the bank in play at any given time. We should be buying $900,000 million properties, $1.2 million properties, and writing them down to $700,000, $800,000, $900,000, putting the workforce covenant on them, the non-market capped, the non-capped, and we should be putting those back into the market. So if we also want to have money available to put under short-term rentals, to bring those units into the fold, into the housing locals fold, we do need more money. I mean, there's the money we do get right now from 5A is not going to build us new units. That financing has to come from somewhere else. I mean, the number's too big for us to contemplate with even the 5% excise tax. That excise tax, we really need to identify how we're going to use that. And right now, we're underutilizing the 5A funds that we have. So it's hard to create an argument that says, yeah, we need more money, and we're not doing anything with what we've got. We've got $6 million sitting on the sidelines. We haven't bought one unit yet. We haven't master leased 10 hotel rooms. We haven't done the things we need to do with the money we have to demonstrate our commitment and our need for another $1.5 million a year. Now, I see that we need it, but I also think that we need to find another mechanism within this to work with our housing partners and make them real partners. It's hard for me to support, at 5% level without creating some incentive. And to Julie's point, I think this is a mechanism that needs to be explored to kind of create that opportunity. At 2.5%, and then maybe explore the idea of a small sales tax. If the idea is that we need $2 million a year or $1 million a year, I agree. There's the excise tax, I think, recognizes that unique position STRs are in and what they've done in terms of changing the capacity, the landscape of capacity. But at the same time, the proliferation of short-term rentals has contributed to lodging tax, to extra sales tax. We've all seen the economic boom that we've all been, I think, to a large degree. There's certainly downsides that you could have that conversation about, but we've all participated in this economic boom and derived benefits from it. So I think 2.5% is not unreasonable. I think that keeps us reasonably priced. I think based on Don's report, I think we've seen across most of Colorado, we've seen a lot of movement in that range. I think all designed to raise a certain dollar amount that has relevance in terms of ongoing programs. So, so that's kind of where I'm at. I'd like to have more conversation about the exemption and how we can incentivize owners to come on board, especially with the Housing Locals program. I think this also needs to be discussed in context of a cap, because and that cap needs to be indexed not to number of units in town, but it has to be indexed to workforce capacity. And this is another way short-term rental owners can positively influence that number and help maybe release short-term rental licenses. So does it complicate the discussion? Maybe. Does it mean maybe we're not ready to put this on the ballot? Maybe. I struggle with the 5% without an exemption, and I probably won't support it at that level.
Thank you, Dan.
Can I ask a question? Say we were supportive of some sort of exemption like Dan is talking about. Does that need to be part of a ballot question, or is that a policy after the fact? Like where does something like that need to come into play, Thad?
The answer to the question is actually, it could be either. In other words, if it is not a part of the ballot question, if it is not incorporated as an exemption into the actual language of this ordinance that incorporates the tax, then that tax will be approved. At any point after approval, the council is free to diminish a tax to create exemptions. You don't need an election to do that, right? You only need an election to create new taxes or raise taxes or make tax policy changes that result in an increase in revenue. So the answer to the question is, frankly, you could do it either way, but unless you make the change as part of the ballot question, what will be initially approved is a tax that does not contain that exemption. And I don't think you can make it simply an administrative decision not to collect a tax. You would want to adopt an ordinance that creates that exemption.
And since I won't be sitting on the council that has that purview, I'm not
on our shoulder though.
Yeah. I will, but I appreciate where you're coming from, Jesse, on that, but I would want to see that as part of the language now.
Others, Andrew?
I'm okay. I mean, I want to put it to the voters. I like the thought that, I mean, I agree with Dan that there are many, many, many complicating factors in having this discussion, but it starts with put the tax in place, and then how we spend it or credit it or create exemptions. That flexibility still exists. But no, I think this is a good use of additional, a good potential use of additional revenue that I hope the voters support.
Go for it, Andy.
Thank you. This is, it's, you know, it's complex. Dan, you blew my mind there. No, I mean, really, it just really based around the partnership ideas is more of what and how we need to work this. You know, it's not automatically that, you know, the town is just against short-term rentals and we're looking to stick it to them, you know, just for a nominal fee of whatever we end up getting out of 5%. You know, but for fundamentally for me, it's yes, short-term rentals has adversely affected the ability to live in this place in the 30 years that I've lived here, right? You can't deny that. One of the big things though is VRBO and Airbnb has created this whole other industry that is not being taxed as a commercial industry, right? That's where I think the money really should be coming from, but it's not going to be. It was almost put on the ballot on the state level 2 years ago, but that was shot down. You know, so it's partially also, I'm sorry, Mary, that you haven't been paying your fair share of that revenue that's being generated based off of, you know, what a hotel is paying, right? You know, and I have a conflict there, and that's why I think an excise tax would potentially be fitting. You know, and again, we're not passing this, we are putting it to the people is what we're doing. You know, if we think, if we are sure that the people wouldn't support this because of the negative effects to, you know, these individual businesses, then the people won't pass it, right? You know, or how do the people feel? We're all just kind of bouncing around without asking the voters. And so that's why I think bringing anything to the voters is good, right? It's not a bunch of people, just a handful of people making a decision on this sort of thing. This is, you know, where this is who should be making the decision. So, you know, it comes down to now, I think 2.5 or 5%. You know, I would like buy-in from property managers, as Dan was saying, to say that, all right, then let's go 2.5%. But we absolutely need that buy-in that they're going to help us convert some stock. You know, I am all about that. And if you're not willing to work with us and buy in, then 5%, let's go 7.5. You know, I mean, like if we're going to battle against each other to get some extra cash in order to fund something for workforce housing, yeah, it's just a drop in the bucket, but we need all the drops we can get for the bucket, right? Because workforce housing needs everything, right? And 1.5 million is not by any means putting the burden or onus on one particular segment, right? Because that is putting a very small percentage of the segment, you know, of the responsibility there, right? We're not looking for 10 million out of it. But at this point, unfortunately, 1 million or 1.5 million is really arbitrary. You know, we don't have that metric to say this is what we're looking for out of this program or what we need and where that money's going to go. So with that, I'm in favor of putting it on the ballot. I would say I would be more in favor of going 2.5% if we actually get everybody to work with us.
Can I just jump back in on, I really think the idea that Dan raises in terms of basically an incentive to encourage more transition from short-term rental back into long-term, or at least seasonal, is great. I think that's a great idea. I'm still at 5 with that incentive. I'm afraid if we go 2.5, where's the incentive? That is so negligible. So that's where I'm at.
Melissa, are you, just to follow up on that, are you looking at trying to draft that language now, or that we revisit that in a future date?
Well, I think we should actually consider drafting it. I mean, I'm with Dan that kicking it down the road, for somebody else to decide. I'd be game to draft it. I mean, that it's certainly a task. Ultimately, a lot of this is as Andy pointed out, it's not about sticking it to the STRs, but it's about re-achieving some level of balance and some knowing that we're never going to look like a suburb in terms of our housing mix, and STRs are very vital to our economy, and we need a healthy mix of them. Absolutely healthy supply, but we also need a healthy supply of long-term rentals and full-time housing units. And so I really like the idea. I don't know if that's a task, how we would go about doing that, but if that were something to incentivize and sort of take the sting out of the 5%, by all means, I'm in favor of that. I just, where personally, I think that going too low just sort of, doesn't do enough. So I'm open to ideas on how we draft that language, but I think I'm always a fan of incentives to encourage the behavior that we want. And so increasing the STR pool by having that sort of linkage or exemption, absolutely, let's consider it.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I want to make sure I'm understanding what we're talking about. Because I know that if you have an STR and you rent it for 90 days, you're not going to pay the tax. It's not the fact that you have an STR license. It's the fact that you've rented your property for less than 30 days, and therefore you pay the tax. So if you rent it for 90 days, you don't pay it, or 31 days. Dan, if I'm understanding what you're referring to, is it basically if I rent my house short-term rental, weekly rentals for the ski season, but then I rent it for 90 days in the summer, that you're saying I wouldn't have to pay the excise tax for my ski season rentals? Is that what you're proposing? Because my view, if it is, my view would be, well, I want it to be a long-term rental in the winter too. You should pay the tax for when you're contrary to the intended goal, which is both utilization as a long-term and revenue for workforce. So I'm not sure if I'm understanding the proposal right.
No, I think you're seeing it. The idea is that in my world, you create an incentive that's healthy enough. And I would say, start at 90 days, start at 120 days. The idea is that we need landing pad units. And that's where we know from our study that we just received a while ago that there's plenty of capacity, and it seems to be plenty of willingness, but the program just doesn't exist. So we need to put dollars under it. So to answer your question, I would say that if you can demonstrate that you've got a lease, somebody in the local workforce to be qualified, and you've got a lease that you can demonstrate, you're exempt from your excise tax for the whole tax year. And what you're doing is creating a competitive advantage for that person. That's one benefit. Two, they're really appreciating the 5A money that's coming back to them in terms of what it takes to rent that STR out in the first place for the 30 days or for that 90 days. So we understand that over 30 days, 31 days, you're not paying sales tax or excise tax because that's not a short-term rental. And that's another conversation probably. But But I would say that you want to create a healthy enough incentive to really get people to really look at it and bring them to the program and explore the program a little bit more deeply, and understand, please, that if from a success standpoint, the money that we raise from this excise tax may be very well coming back to a multitude of short-term rentals if we're successful. Because for us to master lease at market rate and then qualify somebody below market rate to live there, the town's going to be filling the gap with $5-8. So that's what this housing locals program is. That's where we need to put the money. So the excise tax really is just coming back to serve your clients. And the idea is that, we create some level of advocacy for these programs and help us identify and bring those people here so this money does circulate back and create that capacity. It's the cheapest way we can create capacity,
I agree with the concept. I want to say, we should be incentivizing short-term landlords to become long-term, if we want to call that 90 days. I love the idea. If we want to supplement the rent for those facilities, great. But I think for purposes of the conversation tonight, that's a program that we can gladly, I think it'd be potentially a great program funded by the 5%, but to complicate an excise tax with clawbacks and credits and things like that, I think we can create the program in a much simpler manner by implementing the tax and then implementing the program.
Well said. I wrote down the same exact thing. Like I'm fully in support of pursuing that as a programmatic and policy question, not to complicate a ballot question, which we all know ballot questions in general can be so complicated. And so to me, I support 5%. I support the voters making this decision. And then if it passes, then we look at how we develop and fund and continue to work on the programs that we already are working on in conjunction with this. This isn't the silver bullet. It's not the only tool in the toolbox. So thank you. And I totally agree with you, Andrew.
To that point, but to add to it, but not belabor, is trying to draft that language tonight. I think we would be here until tomorrow, because the administrative potential burden of whatever we're trying to do, which I am full support of. But so I think, to Andrew's point, if you short-term rent all winter and into the summer, and then you do whatever amount of days we pick, like, where does that money come from? Who's doing the administrative back work to figure out who owes what back to the start of the year? I just think we're creating something. We would be trying to force something tonight that would have more consequences than we ever can understand at this moment. And it needs its time, and it needs to see if this even passes, which I think is the first step. So I'm in full support, Dan. I think it's a great idea, but I think to what was just said, let's keep it simple. Let's see what the voters want. And then we can definitely implement great things to kind of leverage this and leverage incentives across the board without creating an administrative nightmare that our staff can't keep up with what we have now, and adding that on without thinking it through could be fairly overwhelming, in my opinion. So
I'd like
go ahead, Dan.
I'd like to think it would be that overwhelming. It'd be great if it were. What a great success that would be. If wow, we had 200 conversions, where did that come from? What a great success. Isn't that the idea?
But not to the detriment of our staff, who can't keep up with the workload that we have now, trying to figure out who owes what and when, and verify leases and verify time spent and who's in what unit
Understood.
for how long.
Yeah, we've spent 2 minutes contemplating this, right?
Yeah.
It certainly would be, something you'd have to give staff direction to, and creates the argument for putting this off. Like I said before, I'm not going to be part of the council that has this conversation. From where I sit right now, I would want to be sure that that's something that's not just the potential for being considered, but is embedded in it right now. Do I appreciate it adds some complexity? Sure. But I think it's important to make sure that you have this conversation at the ballot box with all of this contemplated. So I get where you guys are coming from, but without that language, I'll be out, but it doesn't sound like it's going to slow this train down too much.
I appreciate that. And just to add in, I think why I'm comfortable sending this to the voters is a lot of, the two biggest issues we are facing right now, and this council has faced, is short-term rentals and also a lack of workforce housing. And this is a way to see where the voter group in town lands on how to address some of that and a small piece of it. So I'm in support. And I will also say that I don't stay in hotels. Like, I don't see the hotel as a viable long-term business model anymore. I am solely a short-term rental user whenever I travel. But that said, looking at all the information we've gotten with occupancy rates up well over 20% for this year and going into the rest of the spring, to say it's not a pass-through, I don't see that, Mary, and I'm sorry, but when occupancy rates are as high as they are right now, and knowing the demand that the mountain towns have, I think the potential for this is not going to affect the big term, long-term goal of passing it through to you or to the landlords. I've never saw when taxes went up or we started complying with all of the various new rules over the years. When I was in the short-term rental business, it never changed the nightly rate we got to charge. We always got to increase it year over year and never had a problem. So I think this is a good start. And I don't also want that to not do this or lower to a point where it doesn't happen. And then we're back to draconian petitions going around the community to really affect what we need, which is short-term rentals within our town. Our economy is built on them. We depend on them. And I think if we don't put this language to the voters to see, we risk having a far worse outcome where we might not have any. And I don't think that will serve us well at all to accomplish any of our goals. And that's where the 5% I'm comfortable with. And I think asking the voters to weigh in on it and have the final say is the right direction to take in this process. And we still can discuss the maternity thing if anybody wanted to, but I think we have that. And unless there's further discussion, perhaps a motion.
I move that I'm not sure how to exactly word this, but that we have passed agenda item number 4, first reading ordinance 2001. 2201, an ordinance submitting to the registered electors of the town of Frisco at a regular town election to be held on April 5th. The following question, setting the ballot titles of whether commencing on June 1, 2022, the town of Frisco should impose an excise tax of 5% on the short-term rental of accommodation units as a new tax pursuant to Article 10, Section 20 of the Colorado Constitution.
It's been moved to approve.
Mr. Mayor,
please.
Can I make a suggestion?
Please.
The ordinance title has already been read, so that's not necessary. Perhaps the motion would simply be to approve the ordinance as presented, directing the town attorney to bring back a revised version for second reading that removes any and all reference to the second charter amendment question.
I move that.
Thanks.
Is that sufficient for the record?
It ripples throughout. It'll be in the title.
Okay.
It'll be all over the place. So
Great.
with that direction, we'll bring you back a clean ordinance.
Been moved with the direction to approve the first question and omit the second question for second reading. Is there a second? Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Burley. Is there further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, can you call the question, please?
Certainly. Held.
Yes.
Incan, absent. Sherburne,
Yes.
Mortensen,
Yes.
Aronson,
Yes.
Burley,
Yes.
Fallon.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for comment this evening. Next item is executive session. Entertain a motion to enter. If someone needs the language, I have
I
it
need the language.
bottom of the page.
Thank you. Oh, sure. Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor, I move we enter into executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-402 parentheses 4 parentheses F, personnel matters concerning the town manager performance review.
Move to enter into executive session. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. There's a second discussion. We'll call the question, please.
Absent. Sherburne,
Yes.
Mortensen,
Yes.
Aronson,
No.
Burley,
Yes.
Fallon,
Yes.
Held.
Yes.
Thank you.
Meet back at 20 till so we can take a quick break and let everybody log into the other. Does everybody have that link? Great. See everyone in just a minute.